everybody, it's Tripl-L coming in to talk about My Hero Academia chapter 230. Okay, cool. Here we go. House cleaning notes first. If you hear noise in the background, it's because I have the AC on. The city I live in is currently experiencing a lot of wildfire smoke, so it's the only way to keep from suffocating. That's the first note. Second note, there's going to be a live stream on the channel on Sunday. It's going to be a rather special live stream, technically, in terms of it being a challenge. So if you want to pop by and say hi, I would greatly appreciate it, because it's going to be very lonely otherwise. Anyway, let's get into this chapter. Chapter 230, My Hero Academia. I'm ready. Are you ready? Let's go. This chapter overall, I don't think it's as high as the other two chapters for the last couple of weeks. Mostly because I think this chapter didn't really progress things as it did set up the battlefield. And then it also kind of gave us a time limit. So I feel like this chapter is a little bit more technical in that it's just kind of... it's like a midway point in a battle, and it's just setting up the next round. Because twice getting involved is effectively like a new element that's been thrown in, and now we have to see how the battle is going to evolve from that. But there are some interesting things that are, of course, occurring in the chapter, and a lot of it is kind of revolving around some little pieces of dialogue that I really want to talk with you guys about. Now, I'm going to tell you, if I miss anything as we go through the pages, let me know in the comments down below. You guys always have some interesting insights, so I'm very excited to see what I missed this time. And I also want to say that we got a lot of character moments for Twice, and I might not address all of them. Like, just know that the character moments for Twice I feel are largely good. There's not really one character moment that I feel is unnecessary. Well, there's a few character moments that I feel are a little bit redundant, but they're fine given that, well, this is a very essential part of his character. So it's not really bad in any sense of the word. So let's begin. We start off strong, the first page, and also I'm going to be looking to the side because that's where I have the screen here. The first page, very interesting, because it's just giving us rules about Twice's quirk. And I'm very happy with it. You know, we find out it can turn one thing into two, and it can multiply up to two things at once. So I think I understood that correctly. I'm thinking, like, if Twice makes a Toga copy and he makes a Shigaraki copy, he can't make a Dabi copy along with those two. So after that, if the Toga copy goes away, and I assume it must be true for... no, you know what? No, maybe if the Toga copy goes away, he can now make another copy, or he can make Dabi copy. I assume that's how it works. Now, he's also saying that 2 is even weaker than 1, so I assume that just means, like, the more he copies things, they just get weaker. So when you think about it, because the way that Twice is making his copies is most likely, as people pointed out last week, he's having his copies make copies. So when you consider that, that means that if you were down an iteration, if you were down the iterative tree of the second Twice copy creating a second Twice copy creating a second Twice copy, then that's like 8 times as weak as the first copy, I would think. So yeah, that's pretty weak. But I guess when you have a giant mob of people, you don't really care about the weakness. You just care about them hitting once. Although when it says weak, I do wonder, is he referring to damage tolerance, or is he referring to strength or muscle strength, kind of? So can, you know, if it's weaker, can it punch as hard as the first one, is what I'm wondering. But I feel like weaker might refer to damage tolerance. This is one of those kind of iffy spots where it really depends on how they translated the actual chapter. Okay, moving on. That page is still full of information because it's telling us what he can and can't copy. Twice can't copy the bullets. So that's actually pretty interesting. I like that that's... well, I like that it's there. I like that it's created. I like that the author thought about it. Although I feel it's kind of sketchy, because human beings are relatively complex. So I don't really know what data refers to, because he can form a human being, but he can't form a bullet. And he can form a human being that can do fire, or a human being that has quirks. I don't fully understand what he needs to do in order to have the data and the mental image for the bullet. Does he need to know the formula for the bullet? Like, does he need to know what goes into it? Because with this one, we're kind of approaching Momo's power here, but Momo needs specific information. Whereas I don't think Twice knows the molecular compounds that are going on in someone's body. I don't think Twice does know, well, genetics to be able to create it. And there's like the question of, well, are Twice's copies actually biologically rooted? And when I say biologically rooted, I mean like if you were to put a tube down, like let's say another Twice's throat, are you actually going to end up in a stomach, or are you going to end up in a weird like swamp or like a weird like goopy area? You know what I'm saying? It's just because in this case, I think Twice's power is a bit better than Momo's in that I think he might need less information to actually create a copy. And when it comes to the quirk, and I'm definitely overthinking it. I don't think the author is going to go this far. When it comes to a quirk, if Twice doesn't actually understand genetic compositions that allow a quirk to be a quirk, so the quirk factor, if he was to, it would mean that maybe his copies are more of a supernatural thing in that they're able to use quirks by the virtue that they are a copy, not because they actually have the parts that make them a copy. Because Twice believes them to be a copy, it'd be like they can use a quirk, which is, it's different. So I would like more stipulation for this. I do want to see like where exactly is the data threshold for Twice to make a bullet. Where does that start and end? I feel like if they had the doctor break down the bullet for Twice, would Twice be able to create copies of the bullet if the doctor gave him a quick lesson on it? I think most likely, but I want to see that. I want to see that lesson occur. I want to see if they can do that, because then Twice can make Twice. If he does that, Twice effectively fulfills one of the things that the villains needs. And it'd be kind of scary if he does. So I find this page really interesting. Anytime that we have quirk rules coming about, I find it really interesting. It's just data and mental image are just so... they're so vague. And we just need more. We know that definitely for data he needs measurements, which is definitely pushing me more towards the idea that this guy creates something that looks like the original person, but isn't a 100% copy in the terms of it doesn't maybe have genetics. Maybe it exists just by the virtue of the quirk. Anyway, we move on, and we are 8 minutes in. Holy crap, I am sorry. 8 minutes in. This next page, Unlimited Twice works. Come on. That was funny. That was so funny. But there is, again, another really important detail occurring in this page, and that is there's a lady saying that they need to help Skeptic, and they're saying be careful not to kill double. So this is a problem, because, last chapter or so, or maybe 2 chapters ago, I was talking like maybe Destro can do some kind of duplication, or a copy quirk, and now I'm thinking, how Destro has like that thing that forms on his face? It looks kind of like those tests that they do in psychology, and those tests are there to like kind of inform you of someone's psyche. At least that's what they were intended to do. I don't think they actually work that way. But what if Destro can in fact steal or copy quirks, and when he does that, when he's using someone else's quirk, what if his face markings change to kind of look like the person he's copying? Or like, they form a different symbol to symbolize the person he copied the quirk from. It's just like they're trying to keep quirks around, and it makes me feel like Destro is another quirk master. I feel like he can use the quirks of people around him to some degree, but maybe he needs to fulfill some kind of weird condition. Yeah, it's like that little phrases just make it kind of weird. Okay, we move on. We go through. So, page 4 on the Japanese box translation, non-important. It's just showing you that Twice is going through with Toga, that he's holding on to her, and he looks pretty badass. Not a really big deal. Page 5. Page 5 is interesting because it's setting up Skeptic. These guys are surprised that he overcame his psychological trauma. I feel they're going to be surprised about a lot of things, because that's how villains fail. It's usually when they don't estimate their opponent properly. Now, Skeptic is talking about how he has only failed once in all of his life, which is really interesting to me. That means as a kid he probably didn't get Fs very often, or get like one question wrong on a test. But the author is pretty much telling you, when he says I've only failed once in my life, the author's telling you we're going to find out about this later. There's really no need to tell us about this unless the author's going to do a character moment for it. So that's a nice thing to look for in the future. We go into the next page, page 6 on Germani's box. Giran's just talking smack, and then Destro is pretty much setting up the next little bit with Apocrypha, who is most likely the person that Dobby is fighting. Now, Destro was doing a little thing with his face. His face was forming like a marking again. So I'm wondering if, you know, that's again involved there. I'm also wondering if Destro, when he is linked to someone else, if he's actually powering them up. Because Apocrypha did say that Destro made him stronger, but again, can't tell. With not enough information. Anyway, at this point, we're going into a transition, going into Dobby and Mr. Compress. Their pages aren't really important aside from them watching as Twice comes around, and then just to talk about Mr. Compress pointing out that Twice is acting heroic, and then Twice just saying like, "Well, my friends are villains. It's gonna happen." So that's a really good character moment. But, you know, it's just that, a character moment. Just good to inform you of how the characters get along. So let's see. The next page that I found interesting was page 9. Because here, Dobby... Oh, sorry, not Dobby. Twice is saying that he's going to just multiply, Compress, and Dobby. And that's interesting because the author, I think, pretty much just gave us a reason as to why Twice isn't just going to level this whole place. Because we get a reason as to why Twice shouldn't make copies of the best AoE person, that being Gigantomachia. And honestly, I think that's a bit too pedantic. I really do think they should have just gone and made the copy, because that would just be good. But Mr. Compress is... It's funny, because Mr. Compress even points out that it's going to be like over an hour before Machia comes. Now, mind you, the end of the chapter says that is wrong. But it's just funny that the author had to address why he can't just steamroll this whole place. And the consideration of, we want Machia to take care of it. It's like, I feel you could have. I feel they could have gone away with it. Anyway, after that point, we get a full-on blast panel that just shows us that the Twices got eliminated by the ice guy, and then we just have the ice guy telling us that he can make ice by lodging ice into water and freezing it. So this one is actually really interesting, because I was thinking that maybe he could pull out the ice particles from the air. Like maybe he could pull out ice particles from like 1,000 miles above him and bring them down. But his way of doing it actually is a lot more... It's a lot more brute force, and I really appreciate that he actually has to lodge ice into water to make more ice. I was cool. I was into that. Although I wonder how much ice you have to put into water before water freezes, but whatever. Although he points out that he can lower the temperature of ice, and that's really interesting. That's a really interesting way of going about it, because it's interesting that the author put the stipulation that he can't control the temperature of water directly, because ice is just water. So that's a really interesting stipulation. But just the idea that, okay, once it's ice, he can make it make it more icy. It's an interesting little thought. It's an interesting idea. Anyway, again, page 12, another really interesting page. This is the page just confirming Dobby's limits. So we know Dobby has burns all over him. We know that Dobby has been like bleeding out of his eye. We have seen it before. We know it's a thing. But this time we're getting just a little bit more information that Dobby smells like he's burning whenever he uses his power. So he's overheating. That's very interesting. And of course, anytime that we're going into the overheating rhetoric with Dobby, it's just furthering that idea that Dobby is related to Endeavor, because overheating is a big issue with Endeavor. We know that the author established it as a character point in Endeavor's character, because Endeavor has so much hang-ups on it. It's always weird when we see the overheating aspect. I am still kind of holding out that this guy is not related to Endeavor, but honestly, it's moments like these where it gets kind of sketchy. Anyway, big thing here is that Dobby has a time limit, and it's mostly just the overheating aspect. Although maybe we'll get a weird surprise and show you that actually, when my skin burns off, I'm just full fire. In which case, that'd be very interesting. Like imagine like all the burn parts he has on his arms. What if that just all falls away and it's just a guy made of fire underneath it? That'd be really interesting. But I don't think we're going there. Anyway. One last thing I want to say before I move on for this page. It was cool that Twice saved Mr. Compress. It's a little panel, but if you notice it was pretty cool. Anyway, after that, we go into the doctor. And the doctor sets up that Machia is coming in now. So what is the narrative purpose of showing Machia? Well, it's specifically telling you like the end of this fight is in sight if you assume that Machia is the end of the fight. So I'm not really excited that Makia is already coming out because we haven't gotten Mr. Compress and Spinner's backstories yet. So I kind of want to see that. Oh, I missed a page, but let's just finish this point. So Makia being awake, maybe like 5 or 6 chapters, but again, it's hard to tell like how long will it take for Makia to show up. The worst case scenario, he shows up in the next chapter. Better case scenario, he shows up in 5 chapters. Because I still want to see these characters doing stuff. Now, I have to go back to a few pages. I think page 11. It was specifically where Apocrypha was talking about the goal of the Liberation Army. Now, this is interesting. And this goal does allow them to work with villains a little bit more. It allows them to mesh better with what they've been doing so far. And he says that they want to establish a society where social status is determined by the strength of your special ability. This is interesting because now once you're talking about being above another person, you're not talking about liberation anymore. You're talking about just a different class system. So, not going to lie, the Liberation Army has kind of gone down a little bit in my estimation here. Just because I thought they were going for a more free society, but there's no freedom once you have power in place, once you have a power dynamic in place. And actually, if you think about it, if we're talking about powering up or being strong is what establishes your place in society, then All For One is the king of society. So the underground king now gets to become the official king in this new system. Or heck, even All Might is a pinnacle of power in society. So, the thing with the Liberation Army is that I thought they were going for this kind of freedom. But knowing that now that there is a specific I am above you type mentality because of my power, yeah, it's a different way of going about domination. But this would push more to the idea that Destro can collect multiple quirks. Because if we're talking about your power being what decides your strength in society, then it only makes sense that Destro either has an extremely versatile quirk along the lines of Shizaki's quirk, or we're talking that Destro has a copy-ish or a multiple quirk type quirk. We'll have to see. But at this point, you can just say that now the goals of the Liberation Army has become just a different style of All For One, a different style of ruling, just different rules to how you go about ruling someone. Is it bad? Is it a good thing? It's alright. It just takes away some of I think it would have been a bit more difficult to explain what the Liberation Army was going for if they were more neutral, if they were going for anarchy. It would be more difficult to explain and convey that to readers. But saying a merit or a power-based hierarchy, that makes sense and is still consistent with some of the Liberation Army's goals. Although I feel like this is something that Destro probably keeps to himself and doesn't tell his followers that this is what they're going for. Anyway, guys, I think that's everything I wanted to cover. Thank you so much for watching, and till next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day, and yeah, maybe I'll see you on that live stream on Sunday for a little bit. Okay, cool. Till next time.